So I was gonna say, I guess my first question is, how'd you get involved in making storyboards? Was it always something you were interested in?
Well, I started off doing special effects, physical effects. I was always interested in that. Used to see the movies and just think, how did they do that? So I was able to get into that. I worked on a film called Labyrinth. That was my first movie as a trainee. I made tea and I was able to make models and things as well. And anyway, so that progressed into doing physical effects and set building, and then that led to makeup effects. I joined Image Animation at Pinewood, and that's where I met Clive Barker. Now, if you know Clive Barker, who directed Lord of Illusions and Nightbreed, which was the film that I joined as a sculptor. So he is an artist as well as an author. And so I could see that by communicating through art, you could actually, empower your vision. And then our company moved part of itself to the US, and I went along with them. And in doing so, Clive had moved to America at the same time. So I met up with Clive. Initially, it was for us to do Lord of Illusions, the makeup effects, but there was so much to be done. So it was divided amongst shops like Steve Johnson and KNB and so on and so forth. And Clive was like at the table and he goes, "Well, I need somebody to storyboard my film." And I just put up my hand and said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So that's how it started.
Did you have any experience like sketching beforehand, or were you kind of learning it as you did it?
I always drew, I always sketched ever since I was a kid. And then when we did makeup effects, you normally have to sort of show the director, certainly back then before previs and computer imaging, you would sketch it out. Okay, how are we going to do this effect? Specifically, if you replace an actor with a maquette or a mechanical puppet or so on and so forth. So it was through drawing that and camera direction that I got interested. And also, there was an artist called Martin Aisbury who did all the James Bond movies, and he's an English guy. And he had an article in Starburst magazine, which I think still exists, but it was for his work from Alien 3. And I saw that and I was like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. So I started trying to copy his work.
That's awesome. I mean, one of my other questions was when starting out initially, like with a new film, what's your process like going from the script to like sketching out what the characters look like? Like, what's your early like process?
Well, what usually happens, you meet with the director, and some directors are very sure of what they want to do. They even have what you call a shot list. So if you take the script, then break down that script into individual shots. There's a director I worked for on Lockie, Kate Herron, and she very detailed shot list. And also Autumn Durrell, the cinematographer, who won an Oscar for Sinners. She shot Sinners and she shot Loki. And on Loki, she was, again, with Kate, provided even images from Seven, the movie Seven. And so with those, I would then take that shot list and I would draw out very rough panels, send them to them. They would look and say, well, can you do this? Can you add that? Or, oh, that's a good idea. And then I would take those and just go over them, make them a bit more sort of visually acceptable to the whole crew. That's usually the process. Information from the director, rough pass, and then get comments back, and then you present the final pass. And then again, that can change.
As I was going to ask some specific questions for Bad Boys 4, saw that movie 2 years ago, loved watching it in the theaters. The helicopter scene is really dynamic in terms of how the camera moves through the glass, spins around the characters, the vehicle itself. How'd you design that scene and keep track of what was happening while also making it feel hectic and momentous?
Yeah, the helicopter scene's interesting because originally it was meant to be a C-17 troop carrier plane. And then they were like, oh, well, producers want to actually change it to a Chinook. And so how can we, and the big question was regarding to that spin was how do we make it spin? Because if you shoot out a rotor blade, the helicopter just drops. And the fun part about this job is doing research. And I learned that I think there's the rotor exerts 20 tons of pressure when those rotors rotate. So, if something damages them, the helicopter just drops. But we wanted to create a sense, and the directors wanted to create a sense of stretching that out a bit, movie time. So the idea was initially that one of the kind of the villains shoots out the rotor blade or sets a pedal, pushes a pedal down, and that sets a tilt on it. And it, anyway, initially to just set the helicopter spinning. So that was the idea. And then they what the directors wanted that camera to travel through that spin and go around it. So my job was to sort of illustrate that so people could see exactly what they meant. So that was fun to draw, and had to draw it. It had to be done quickly as well. So yeah, use sometimes you use SketchUp to get the shape of the machinery and stuff like that. I think on this one I used it for reference, but just drew it. Sometimes it's even just quicker to draw than even put the 3D model into the image. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I also really like, well, when it goes through the broken glass, through the little hole in
Yeah,
it to the inside. Yeah, that was really cool.
yeah, and that was all from them. That was their pitch. That's what they wanted. So I just had to draw it and make sure it would work visually.
I also I saw on your IMDb that you briefly worked on a Halo project back in 2014. I'm kind of curious if you could talk about what that was for and how you got involved in that.
Which project was that?
I saw you had some artwork for a Halo
Oh, Halo.
store.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was from my a colleague Dean Israelite who directed Power Rangers, and he's actually just directed Scooby-Doo Origins, and I did some stuff for him there. It's going to be pretty cool because it's sort of like a mix of Stranger Things. But back on that, he was pitching to direct Halo. So he asked me to do some pitch boards. And actually, there was another guy, Stuart Beattie, who's a writer director, and he asked me also. So I've been involved with the project from a pitch point of view, but never the actual one. And both of those directors, writers, wanted me to illustrate sort of a sequence from their scripts, and that's what I did basically.
That's awesome. Then also, I'm a huge Southland Tales fan, and I'd love to know what it was like working on that. I know it's a long time ago, obviously, but especially
No,
because it's such a big scope in terms of what it's tell, especially because it has a pretty small budget for what it tries to tell.
yeah, I'm interested that you respond to that movie because and what about it sort of intrigues you?
So I did a video where I love the scene of Justin Timberlake singing the Killers, and
Right.
it's like, and also just like I don't know. I think it's the best performance I've seen from The Rock. Like I really
Mm.
like him in that movie. It's like a weird like caricature of himself where he acts all tough, but he's kind of sensitive deep down. Like Sean William Scott, everyone does such a good job in it. And then it's also, I mean, I think at some points it's a little too ambitious for its own good, but I'd rather have something like that. Like it does so much at once, and I think it's very impressive because of it.
Yeah, I think when I remember reading the script and we're discussing the visuals with Richard, and I'm not quite sure how I connected with him, but anyway, I met up with him, and at the time I was a lot younger, didn't have white hair, so we it was I looked younger than my age at the time, and so he was like, oh, well, do you know Stanley Kubrick? Have you ever seen The Shining? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I've seen The Shining. I love Stanley Kubrick, but he was very interested in that composition that Stanley Kubrick does, where it's dead center and everything comes from that. And so it initially started a few weeks' work, and it just grew and grew into about 10 weeks. And he was on cloud nine, wasn't he? After Donnie Darko, he could do no wrong. And I think they looked at this script and just were like, yeah, 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 fine. And next thing you know, it's like, oh, this is actually quite an expensive idea, especially with the airships and so on and so forth. Yeah, I just worked very closely with him, and again, he knew exactly what he wanted. But it was an interesting movie, isn't it? It's quite you had was it Christa Now, for memory serves, the
Yeah,
female,
with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
yeah, Michelle Gellar, and and she was this kind of porny star, and you had, all these logos coming. It was very internet sort of heavy, and it actually, because back then there was no, the iPhone, I think, had just barely come out. So if you look at it now, you're like, well, yeah, well, of course, you got all these bubbles coming up and all this screen stuff. But back then, it was actually quite far-reaching vision he had of where we are kind of now. So yeah, I kind of thought it was cool. I was a bit sad when it just bombed at the box office, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's gotten a good following over time. And also, when you mentioned the logos, there's a great bit at the beginning when the one of the tanks for the military has a Bud Light logo
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, yeah. He foresaw all that. I mean, I think if what would be fun if he were to go in now, re-edit that. I think you could get something from it, and it'd be quite interesting.
I know I saw that he said he still wants to like explore that story more. I know he wrote like the those prequel books. He did like
Yeah,
a bunch of scripts. Yeah, so
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'd be up for whatever they have left to tell in that story.
yeah, yeah.
And then I was also wondering, what was your experience on both the Aquaman movies in terms of like there's so many crazy creatures, environments, and also like to know how you did the action scenes, especially when I was a kid. There was this Batman cartoon that had Black Manta in it. He was always one of my favorites, and I really loved the boards you did with him. Love seeing the laser eyes, the jetpack, all that stuff.
Oh, thanks. Well, the experience with Aquaman and Aquaman 2 was really great actually because first of all, I got to meet James Wan, who he was the producer director on both of those, and of course James, he came from Australia and he was one of the first young guys, to break out by creating his own script, getting to shoot it for under $1 million, which was Saw. And also Lee Wannell as well, his partner and writer from Australia. And they just blew up, as they say, just amazing. So it was great to finally meet him. And James is so enthusiastic. You walked into his office and it was filled with all these maquettes and concept art. And I started on the first one straight away, started on the arena sequence. And back then, before COVID, you didn't work remotely. You would go into the studio. So again, it was great to go into WB in Los Angeles and just be on those sound stages. And now it wasn't unfortunately it wasn't actually shot there, but it to see be in the area and see that the movie making magic in process on other shows anyway. But so I did the Colosseum sequence, and again it was James who say, well, here, this is what I'm thinking. And I think James mentioned he just wanted us the scene to be just very dynamic and acrobatic. And so gave me a few pointers, and then I was off on my own and had a week to sort of come up with some stuff. And one of the things I did come up with was having them fight on the shield of one of the huge statues. And James responded to that. And so that's always nice when you have an idea, because that's what you are. You're not the director, but you are an arm of the director. I see it as. And so if you come up with an idea and they respond to that, then that's great. You're part of that. It's lovely. So I did that, and then we did about there was about 5 iterations on that scene, which then went into pre-visualization for more accurate camera lens work and visual effects. Storyboarding is much more about just the sense of action, the map of it. You know what I mean? And then you go to previs, and that's where it gets all technical. So yeah, it was great. And then and of course, I love creatures. I came from makeup effects, so it was great to see those creatures and just be able to draw them. And the same with Aquaman 2. Now, when Aquaman 2 was done, that one was shot in London, but James he's a very loyal guy, and he kept us guys on here in the US doing the boards. And of course we had COVID, so it was remote anyway. And so we would just work with James via Zoom. And again, one of my sequences, which was when they go to the city, the sunken city. And again, he was like, well, this is my influences. See what you can do. Wide shots, wide, wide, wide. I want it big, big, big. And so that was fun to put together. And again, it was a process of roughs, comments, and then finals, and then he presented those.
That's cool. Were any of the scenes you did like were there any scenes that were like drastically different at any point from the final version? Like you said, the Coliseum thing had like 5 revisions.
Yeah, I think there was, memory serves now, it was there was one scene where he comes in at the bottom It's looking like a pit. They wanted more of an introduction, and there's a chamber, and he meets with Orm, and they kind of size each other up, and then they go up through this antechamber into the main arena. I'm not sure. I think that was added, but I'm not sure if it. I honestly, I can't remember if it's still in the movie.
That's fair.
And then on the second one, we had scenes where it was like Aquaman was watching mankind kind of, bugger up the environment. There was an oil pipeline that was broken. There was a tanker sort of ship transporting cars, and that was overturned, and all the cars were falling into the sea and interfering with the wildlife. So we had a sequence of Curry, diving down into the sea and pulling things up, and all that was cut from the. I don't even think it was shot, to be honest. Yeah.
Like I heard that one was also like re-edited a lot too by the end of it. I think I also do I am kind of for any of the Black Manta sequences, how was your like ability, how did you decide like how to make him move and like fight? Because like I've always been a big fan of his.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I just like the look of him. It's such a cool look. And again, James, I did one thing when they were having a fight, and James was like, I don't want him just to kick. What else have you got? Come on. So I came up with the idea of him just accelerating his jetpack and just boom it and just punching a guy in the head with his helm, and he liked that, and so we went with that. So it was just a question of, what, a lot of this is instinct. If you see a character, and I've got to be honest with you, I don't know much about Black Manta. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of stuff, but I think it's good because it gives you a little more of a fresh aspect of it. You're not held in by the constraints, as it were. So I just saw that awesome costume. The actor who portrayed him was great, and I just sort of, okay, well, and again with James's direction, because of course James has an encyclopedic knowledge of all those characters, he has to. So I just combined those, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think a similar question. I know you were on Suicide Squad for a very long
Mm.
time with David Ayer, and that movie changed a lot during both post and pre-production. I was wondering if there are any sequences you worked on for that that were modified a lot during, or just like, in general, what was your experience on with that?
Well, my experience was interesting because David Ayer, he wrote Training Day, which I really enjoyed, and Anton Fuqua directed that, and it's a pretty awesome movie. Actually, at the time, it was I used to live near the area where it was Lincolnites. It's quite interesting, but so he, I was impressed with him as a filmmaker. He comes, he was in the military, so he has that, he experienced, kind of war. So obviously, he had that kind of energy about him. He's very interested in the weaponry and everything, just something I know nothing about, frankly. But he, he was a cool enough guy, and again had a vision. One of the things I do remember was when it came to the demon characters with all the multi eyes. Well, originally that was going to be, they were going to have these kind of glass skulls. It wasn't really. It looked cool. The concept artwork looked cool, but it wasn't really. I don't think they were really sure about that. And then he drew literally on the whiteboard. He goes, no, and he drew this head with all these eyes in it. Now, we've seen this image quite a lot now in other movies, but at the time, it was actually quite a fresh idea. And, so he came up with that, and I actually saw that happening in front of my eyes, which was fun. Now, I did the sequence I did, and again with David, it was, here's the script, go away, come back with a rough. Every Friday, he would come round and have a look at our stuff, because we were in an office. It was about, James Doe and Drew and myself, and we were all sat in the office drawing away. And one of the sequences I did was a Batman, and Batman actually has a fight with a crocodile, Croc. Is it Croc? Yeah,
Killer
I think.
Croc, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They have a fight, and that was my first storyboard, and then of course that went away. But my main sequences was when they go into the city and they go through the cube farm, and they meet up with the demons, and there's a huge fight, and that went through a lot of iterations and changes, and yeah, that was the main thing I did. And then you finally meet who's the guy with the flames.
Diablo, I think.
Yeah, it's the man. Yeah,
Uh,
Diablo. They finally meet Diablo, and Will Smith kind of, trying to makes him angry in order to for him to explode and kill the demons. So that I did that, and actually it was quite fun because there was one shot I did looking up, and all the demons fall, and it literally you could take that shot and put it over the frame of the film, and it matches. So that's always a nice thing when a sketch you drew literally goes right through the system and comes out the other end. It's always a little pep for the ego. But yeah, again, that was fun. And initially, we were at Warner Brothers again, and then it moved to Canada to shoot. And so we did it remotely. We all worked remotely. And Drew was the lead artist, so we kind of worked under him, as it were. He would talk with David, and the directions would come down to us. So.
that's cool. As you also, sorry to repeat another question, but you say there were a lot of scenes that were different for that, like revision scenes.
Mhm.
Were there any things you remember in early ones? Because I do know that's a movie that was changed a lot during both post and pre-production, like different monsters, different fights.
Well, there was the goddess, and she initially there was. I remember drawing a scene where she takes a heart out of a box, and it's kind of a little bit black magic, and she takes that heart, and then she goes to one of the characters. Sorry, it's a little bit misty.
No,
Um, so there was a sequence there. Oh, there was a sequence where the Joker. Um, um, Harley Quinn wants to commit suicide. She drops away from Joker, and he's actually as you know, he was in love with her, so he actually dives into the acid bath and to rescue her, and that I was really enjoyed drawing that scene. Because we weren't quite sure what the Joker was going to look like then. This was before the whole grill thing. But the thing is, you see, is when the first advert came out, I don't know if you remember the first advert for that film, Suicide Squad, when it first, I was like, this is looking awesome. This, the way it was done, it was hard. It wasn't all this colorful, respectful to Marvel. It was a different direction from Marvel, and it was really nice to see. It was a bit harder, a bit more gritty. And I think the studios got scared by it because I think if they had kept, I mean, the whole Joker thing with the grill and that, I thought, yeah, you know what, that's a good update. It modernizes it. Um, I think they really, if they'd had let it go a bit and actually let the movie come out. But I never saw the movie as it was. I only saw what came out. That's the thing. I know what we boarded, and some of the stuff, was kind of hard, as in, it was gritty. But yeah, it's a shame what happened, I think. It would be nice to see the film come out as he intended one day.
yeah, he claims it's mostly done except for like VFX stuff, so I'm definitely
Hmm.
rooting for that. But I guess it's interesting you talk about the horror aesthetic because I do feel like it has kind of like it's interesting because it still feels like like a graphic novel, but it does feel less colorful. It feels more like militarized almost,
Yeah,
which I think makes for an interesting change of pace.
yeah. I mean, as I say, because of his experience,
Hmm.
he was, it was all about, right, this gun does this and this does that. And, I want to be accurate. And no, I respect that, obviously. But it was, and I thought that worked actually for the tone of the film. But obviously, the studio was like, nah, this is too dark or hard. But it should be dark. It was the end of the world, wasn't it? It's dark.
It's actually kind of adding on to that because I know you start, I think on your LinkedIn said you started in like 2014. Was that another one where you knew what the actors and costumes would look like, or were you given a lot of freedom with it? Like you mentioned, you didn't know what Joker was supposed to look like at the time, but
Yeah, initially we didn't, but the concept guys, Bill Bresky was production designer, and she had her concept guys, and they were churning out their stuff. So we would get, the goddess came along, and then what Joker looked like, and there's the scenes of the city with this crystalline sort of like bacteria, as it were, and then, because the demons you were meant to shatter them. Excuse me. They would be shattered, bullet hits, and yeah. Um, But yeah, so it was pretty good at the beginning. Yeah, it wasn't. We weren't sure what stuff would look like, but pretty quickly that stuff came along, which is always nice when you get concept art. When you get that just grounds the boards, and it really is nice to have that.
Well, I guess two more questions. One of them I just thought of right now, but I remember on IMDb it said you worked on Jackass 2.
Oh yeah,
Feel like I have to ask about that because I'm a big fan of those.
one of my. Well, the funny thing is, I mean, and I met those guys, and they're very nice, and and it's interesting because it just opened up that the everything is an illusion, right? Because I storyboarded, I had a dance scene in there, and I think the main other thing I did was there was a bear trap. And the thing is the reality is it's a bear trap, but it's half sprung. So it's not a full sprung bear trap. So they did a lot of things like that. What you think is, when they go, ah, it is hurting, but it's not as bad as it would be. A bear trap would kind of almost cut your arm off, really.
Yeah.
That was that was a couple of weeks on that, I think, and then just did this dance scene and all dive into the water and stuff like that. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, they didn't play any jokes on me or anything, so it's all right.
All right. I guess my last question is: are there any franchises or directors you would like to work on that you haven't yet?
Well, I've always, I mean, I love Harry Potter. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I've read the books to my son many times when he was younger, and I just love it. And I love the movies. I think, and as the movies go along, they get better. So I wish I worked on that. And I remember I heard the TV series was coming up. Like, oh God, but yeah, I didn't really pursue it to be honest. But and now I'm in LA anyway. I could have gone back to London if I wanted to work, if there was an opportunity. But that would have been great. I think Foundation is great. My very good friend James Doe is a superb artist. He works on Foundation, but I love Foundation, that just vast science fiction. Ridley Scott's, what is it, Wolves, Raised by Wolves,
I've
which
heard of it, I think.
yeah, which is awesome science fiction TV, and that was cut short. Stranger Things, I got a call about Stranger Things, but that didn't happen. Directors, well, don't I saw Obsession. Now I could see some things, with it. It's very easy to go, oh well, the sound and blah. But for a guy, yeah, Curry, I would like to work with Curry, I have to say, and also Zach. No, not Zach. Sorry, the guy who did Weapons. I loved Weapons.
Zach Kreger.
Yeah, I just loved Weapons. I wasn't his first movie. I was a bit like I loved the whole thing with the head smash and that, but then it went a bit. I mean, I liked it, but when he pulled out that big milk bottle, I just found myself laughing. British humour, I suppose. But Weapons, I loved, and I think I would love to do something for him as well. So actually, quite a lot of these young modern filmmakers, I mean, and yeah, I guess an old fart, you would say, comparatively, but it doesn't matter. It's about the energy you bring to it, and I think those guys, you could say, oh, they're just young, they're 20, what the hell they know? I disagree. You just look at their work, and it's pretty impressive. So I'd love to work with those directors. I'd love to work with Steven Spielberg, because I've never worked with him. I did work on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but that was in special effects. But to actually storyboard for him, but he's kind of moved away from boards now. But yeah, Kubrick, because he's not around it. That would have been great. Kurosawa, actually the guy who did G-1 as well, whose name I've forgotten, but I'd love to have boarded that. So yeah, there you go.
All right, that's a solid lineup. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I had a very nice time talking with you. And I also wanted to say I really like the Metropolis shirt too. I
Yeah,
just noticed. Yeah, and
and
then also I love all the little creatures in the background. I just noticed the little green guy with the spiked teeth.
yeah, one of the just a little puppet I made for my son for his one of his videos he did.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Cheers.
All right,
Uh,
thanks so much, Martin.
thanks so much, Jake, and really appreciate you asking me to interview. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully, I'll talk to you again at some point.
All right, mate. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Cheers.